So today we're talking about ADHD in the workplace. And why inclusion starts with understanding. We're going to rethink, we're going to redesign, we're going to reflect today, all in 1 hour. Let's go for it. So just to go into a little bit of information about who we are. So Pettypool is a charity based in Northwich in Cheshire. We have different elements to our organisation. So we have a SEND college. We have 120 adults with additional needs who come to our college, and we support and prepare them for employment. We have our paid services, which is a Pettypool in the community, where adults with additional needs can come and join a service where they go out and explore their community. They recognise their roots, what's available to them, and develop their independence. And we have our outdoor education service, which again is around understanding, assuming that people that people can, not that they can't, so that education and the outdoors is for everyone, and it's an inclusive environment, so it's a really exciting part of our organisation. Also as well, we have our autism practical support part of our charity. That's a charity based in Northwich, and they offer support to families, individuals who may or may not have a diagnosis of autism. That can involve counselling, activities, advice. So they are part of our fantastic organisation, and they're based in Northwich in Cheshire. So introducing myself as well. So my name's Emma Myles. I'm one of the many Emmas that exist at Pettypool. I have been working in SEND for 8 years now, across a variety of roles, teaching assistant, teacher, curriculum manager, and with that I've worked with a variety of adults and young people with additional needs and who are neurodivergent, focusing on supporting them for employment and also working towards the goals, their own individual goals. It may be around employment, it may be around communication and being independent in their own lives. I was a SEND tutor at Pettypool and then a curriculum manager, and now I've started this new role as a professional trainer, working with external organisations on being more neuro-inclusive. I am neurodivergent myself, so I have ADHD, late diagnosed only 4 months ago, so it's been a very, very quick learning experience, but I'm still kind of figuring out my own neurodivergent identity and what support I need as an employee myself. So I bring a lot of lived experience to this. And I'm passionate about helping neurodivergent adults into meaningful employment. The stats are significantly low of how many people who are neurodivergent are in employment or stay in employment. So this whole training is around developing those inclusive workspaces where people can thrive, and we're seeing more people in employment and less people leaving employment. So why is this training important? Why are we here? So our training explores key facts about neurodiverse people in work. It raises awareness and breaks down myths associated with neurodivergence. It provides practical tools to offer better support. It helps unlock innovation and fresh ideas. It helps you build a true culture of inclusion. And it strengthens performance and teamwork. So first, let's look at what is ADHD. So first, I want to just get an idea of where their knowledge currently is at. So if you could please use the chat and rate yourself. 1, I know very little about ADHD. I'm here from scratch. I know a little bit. At 2, I've heard, maybe read about ADHD, but want a little bit more clarity on it. I have some experience. I've worked with or supported someone with ADHD. I have lived experience, either neurodivergent yourself or closely connected to someone who is, or I'm confident in my knowledge, but I'm here to learn a little bit more. Oh, it's a lovely range. I love a range of learning. Right. Fabulous. Okay. Brilliant. Fabulous. We've got a nice range of people here then as well. We can always learn more, even myself can learn more, but that's really good that there's so many people here today that want to learn more about ADHD and how to support ADHD employees, colleagues in the workplace. So brilliant. Thank you everyone for contributing there. Okay, so what is ADHD? So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, in the neurodivergent circles, we don't really like this name. We don't feel like it really represents us and what ADHD feels like. The word deficit in itself isn't really neuro-inclusive itself. But I don't have the power or authority to change that. So I just say, bear it in mind, it is a bit of a label. Everyone that has ADHD is very different, but we'll explore kind of what ADHD is today, and we'll use that term to talk about it, particularly in areas relating to how their brain functions around executive functioning. That can be around time management, managing their day-to-day organisation. Again, we'll delve into that a little bit more. It might be impulse control, it might be how they retain and regulate their attention, and it might be how their memory works, and how sometimes their memory can't work, but it depends on every single person. It's not about paying attention, and it's not about people with ADHD don't pay attention. It's about that inconsistency within that attention and that retaining focus. So sometimes when I'm out and about, I hear that, well, it's ADHD, everyone's got ADHD now, or it's come out of nowhere. And actually ADHD is recognised in the medical world since the early 1900s. It's not relatively anything new, it's just talked about a lot more as our culture is developing. It used to be called minimal brain dysfunction. Again, not a big fan of that, but that's how it used to be identified. Historically, it has been misunderstood as a behaviour issue, a discipline issue, rather than a condition. Modern research does now identify it as a neurodevelopmental condition, not as a character flaw or a parenting failure. It's not about the behaviour, it's about why the behaviour might be happening. There's an ongoing shift around from this deficit model to something around kind of why this is happening, how the brain functions differently, and how people with ADHD can be welcomed and the environment adapted to our world. So there are 3 different types of ADHD. So there is inattentive, which is a difficulty of sustaining attention. It might be forgetfulness, it might be memory issues, it might be around that organisation that we've talked about, managing time, managing your diary, managing your day-to-day and planning. There's a hyperactive impulsive model that might be, again, hyperactive, constantly fidgeting, that restlessness, making impulsive decisions without thinking things through, might be interrupting people because you just can't wait for an answer. However, a lot of that can be seen in different ways depending on gender. So it can be more physical restlessness, say for example in boys, but actually in girls, in women, it's internal, and it can be a restlessness of the mind. It can be that continuous, your brain doesn't stop, you're constantly overthinking about everything, questioning everything, and it's more internal rather than physical. Or it can be the combined type. So the combined type is a mixture of the both. That's something that I have myself. So I'm a combination of the both. And again, it can change and it can develop over time. It's not just that here's your diagnosis, that's it, that's you contained in a box. But it's just breaking it down the different areas of the condition. So, oh, didn't want to work. ADHD across the lifespan. So symptoms can change with age. It's not just a childhood condition. It's something that you can be born with and then it goes through across your lifetime. Again, it is something that may not be obvious when you're younger, and again, you might have that late diagnosis later in life, but it isn't just something that happens with children. What the symptoms might change again from ages. So in children, it's probably more around that hyperactivity, that impulsivity, emotional outbursts. In teens, it can be those struggles academically, it can be risk taking, it can be low self-esteem. In adults, it again might be that time blindness, that struggling with the life admin and managing our time. It might be burnout from again trying to do so much all at once, and it might be difficulty with routine or those admin tasks. Many adults are diagnosed later in life. It can often be when their children are going through a diagnosis that they might recognise within themselves. It can be during a mental health assessment. It can be something that they pick up themselves and then want to explore further. But it's seen a lot more in adults being diagnosed later on in life rather than when it picked up when they're younger. But as I say, things are changing. Let's have a look at the ADHD brain. So the differences in how our brain functions. So that might be possible struggles around starting a task, initiating a task. Often it can be a big task that no one wants to do, that we can put off time and time again until we have to force ourselves to sit down and do it. It can be really hard to initiate that task. Organising and planning, it might be again managing our time, managing our week, managing our workload. It might then switching between tasks and multitasking itself we might struggle with. It might be managing time and deadlines, regulating emotions and our impulses. So there's lots of different parts of the brain and how our management system works, the different functions of our brains, and it just works differently. And we're going to explore this further, focusing on those different elements. So let's have a look around how the brain works and our reward system. So an ADHD brain has lower levels of dopamine. That is linked to motivation, reward, pleasure. So it's like we're always seeking out that reward. We're always seeking out that feeling, that rush, because we have lower levels of it. Again, that might range from jumping out of a plane to having a lot of purchases on Vinted. So again, that's just giving you a little bit of an interest into my life, insight into my life. But this affects how people with ADHD experience interest and motivation. We're always seeking that hit of dopamine, and that's why sometimes we might make those impulsive decisions because we need that rush of that feeling. We know that purchase will give us that feeling for a bit and then it will fade, so then we'll make another purchase. And that's why sometimes people with ADHD can struggle with that impulsive decision, because they just want that feeling. And again, why we talk about this attention, this focus, that can be a lot around interest based. So again, if someone's talking about something that's really interesting to us, we can be really focused on that topic. If they're talking about something that we're not interested in, that can sometimes be the reason why we're just not interested and we are struggling to focus because it's not something that we can focus on. Time perception and emotional regulation. So we've talked really a lot already about that difficulty estimating time and planning time. So it can be actually estimating how long something might take. So again, on these sessions and when I'm planning my sessions, I can really struggle sometimes around time management. One time an activity might take 20 minutes, another time it might take 10. It's really hard for my brain to sometimes figure out how long something might take. So we go with the flow. It might be trouble planning ahead or feeling that urgency to do something until the last minute. So that's why sometimes we can put off a task and then we do it until last minute because we kind of push it off and then we have to do it. It can be very much about living in the now or living in the not now. So sometimes we can be really focused on the future rather than actually what's happening in front of us and what we need to do today. It can be really focused on next week, next month, next year. It can be really, really hard for us sometimes to live in that moment. Emotional regulation. We are really quick to feel a lot of emotion. It can be a wave. It can be really that quick 0 to 60. We have no in between of that frustration, that overwhelm, overstimulation, and then once we've hit that, it's really then hard for us to calm down. Once we've hit that, again, it can be very different every single individual. I've worked with individuals with probably more complex needs where they've needed a lot of time to really come down. They've needed a lot of strategies to come down. For some people, it might need less, but it can be very hard for us to go back into that calm zone once we've gone up. Sometimes as well, it might be that we just need to let it out before that we can then come down. It depends on the individual. For myself, sometimes I just need a good cry, and then that releases all that emotion, and then I can feel like I'm ready to come down after that point. Just depends on the individual. Strong emotional responses to rejection or perceived failure. So we talk a lot within the ADHD world around rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that is something that you can't be diagnosed with, and there's still a lot of research going into, because it's not just associated with ADHD, but it's around that true fear of rejection, and really struggling processing that rejection and seeing it in a different light. And it's yes, Darren, it's very brutal. It's very brutal. It can stop you completely in your steps, and it almost sometimes you just need to process it yourself. In my world, obviously, when I'm training, I have to take on feedback, which in my heart, my logical brain, I understand that feedback always helps something get better and develop, but also at the same time, processing that can be really hard, because I see it as rejection, I see it as failure, and a lot of emotions can come from that. It's almost while sometimes ADHD comes with that anxiety diagnosis as well, or can often be misdiagnosed as anxiety, because it's like you're just constantly feeling fear around. It's almost like imposter syndrome. It's very similar around, you're waiting to be found out. You're waiting for that failure. You know it's coming, you just don't know when, and you're constantly on edge. So it is something that we talk a lot about ADHD and why, and we'll delve into a little bit about what you can do to support your ADHD colleagues. But this is a common challenge that people can face, especially in the workplace, around practically processing that feedback and not feeling that rejection as strongly as we naturally do so. Okay, so we're going to look at some common myths associated with ADHD, and we're going to write them off because they're myths, that they're not true. So again, common myth that we sometimes hear: ADHD is just bad parenting. It's behaviour, they're not being told off properly. Absolutely not true. ADHD is a condition. It affects someone's brain. It's not a result of poor discipline or upbringing. Again, in an education environment, it might be that someone's needs aren't being met. And that's not necessarily no one's individual fault, but that can be what it means if we're seeing that behaviour at home. Again, it's that person trying to communicate what they're struggling with as a child. It could be as an adult as well. It's not just about bad parenting. It's something that someone's born with. Everyone's a bit ADHD sometimes. A common thing that can come up, there are people that can have traits that don't have a diagnosis and don't have ADHD. There are traits that people can have of autism, but it doesn't mean they have autism. So it's recognising that you might have traits. You might struggle with time management. That doesn't mean you've got ADHD. That's just a trait of ADHD amongst others. So it's recognising that whilst everyone can be distracted, we can all have a forgetful day. ADHD is about persistent impairing patterns. So it's someone's brain functions differently, and it affects them day to day. It's not just an off day, it affects them day to day for the rest of their lives. ADHD only affects boys. Again, we've talked about already about that boys and men, it can sometimes appear more physical. That hyperactive activity, you've seen it as that stigma of the naughty schoolboy, you can't pay attention, running around the class. That's not that might be an element again of someone's needs not being met, of someone that has ADHD, but actually girls and women are often undiagnosed because of those internalization. We it's that hyperactive brain, those impulsive decisions are less obvious because it's internalized. So again, that's why often girls and women are misdiagnosed. That again, with anxiety, we learn very early on how to mask, and we learn, and that can be unconsciously. Again, I have only been recently diagnosed, so for 32 years I was masking, unaware of it. But it's not just boys, and again, even within boys, it can appear differently. Every single individual with ADHD has different traits and symptoms. People with ADHD just need to try harder. There's this element of laziness that you just need to try harder. Like, come on, you've got this. Let's just try loads of more things, and it doesn't work that way. It's not about motivation. If we're putting off life admin tasks, it's not the fact that we just can't be bothered to do it. It's our brain is just that is our way that our brain functions. It just pushes things back. It's a trait within itself. It's not that we are lazy. It's a regulation issue. It's the way our brain works. So the brain struggles to activate on demand, especially for low interest tasks. So again, you might be stuck in that meeting and you're talking about something that may not interest you. It's really hard for someone with ADHD to kind of be ready with ideas and focus on everything all at once. It's not about motivation at all with ADHD. We've talked a lot about challenges so far as well, but it's really important to recognise the strengths of ADHD. We bring so much as people, and there's so much that we can celebrate. So it kind of comes hand in hand, but it is really important when we do this training to recognise the strengths that neurodivergent employees also bring. That it's important to acknowledge the challenges, but it's also really important to acknowledge the strengths that they have. So big picture thinking. Often it's the CEO. It's strategically brilliant at thinking of things, the wider picture, always thinking later on rather than the moment. A great creativity. Again, bring a lot of energy. Bubbly individuals. I often hear that a lot as people with a lot of bubbly personalities. We're adaptable in a way. We often kind of joke about the fact that you want someone with ADHD in a crisis because it's almost like we can switch our brain, we can adapt in that moment, and then afterwards we can process everything later, but it's like we can almost switch. Spontaneous. We all love that spontaneous friend. We all need that spontaneous friend in our lives. We often can come up with ideas. Again, that impulsivity can be fed in a really positive way. Especially at work as well, we can always come up with lots of different ideas, solutions. Our brains work differently, so that means actually we can bring different solutions to problems as well. As people who have previously probably been used to the being excluded, we have a lot of resilience. It takes a lot to knock us down because we've had to keep going for years. So we're really resilient people, and we can keep going. We keep going. Again, that's why sometimes we need that support, and we need other people to maybe recognise when we're going to be burnt out, and where we need that help, because we will just keep going until our body tells us to stop. But there's so much about us that is really positive that we can bring to an organisation. Again, there's always challenges that come with it, and again, it's always that balance of recognizing that there will be struggles that people with ADHD face, but there are also brilliant things that they can do. We talked about that working memory. Our memory, it can dip, it can be different each day, but we can really struggle to remember things. That organisation and planning, just managing our time, can be really hard and something that we have to really kind of really focus on to make sure it's right. That initiation, completing tasks. Sometimes we can also miss deadlines because it's really hard for us to remember the deadlines are there. Our emotional regulations, again, we have a lot of feelings, so this can be really hard to manage those feelings properly. And again, there might be strategies that ADHD people can use, which we'll go through, but a lot of people will be on a different journey. So some people will have those strategies, some people might need them putting in place. And that impulsivity, again, my own impulsivity, I can make some really good decisions, but I can also make some really bad ones because sometimes you can't think things through, and it's just recognizing that can be a challenge of really thinking things through before we take that action. The ADHD diagnosis journey can be a challenging one. Um, Many adults, as I said, are diagnosed later in life, often after years of feeling different. They might have been struggling with work. They might have been in very different job environments because they've struggled in different jobs. They might have struggled in relationships. They might have struggled with their mental health. Again, everyone can be in a different point in their diagnosis journey, but it isn't the quickest at the moment. I believe currently the stat I looked at yesterday was there's 236,000 people waiting for a diagnosis assessment in the UK. So that's quite big, and can mean often a lot of people are getting told that they'll have to wait 64 months through the NHS. So again, there is a current crisis around that. So actually that diagnosis in itself can be really hard to go through. It might be triggered again by a child's diagnosis, and there might be some traits that you recognise within yourself. It might be through burnout and breakdown, or continuous burnout and breakdown. It might be through therapy or mental health assessments that this avenue has been suggested. It can be different for every individual. For myself, I started looking, I've worked with people with ADHD for many years, but never really kind of associated it with myself. But I actually then started looking at kind of adult diagnosis videos online, and I started seeing traits within myself, and I thought, okay, this is something that I think I'm going to need to look at. So it can be different for every individual. So the barriers to the diagnosis, we've talked about the actual process itself can be a barrier. It can be a long wait. A lot of people, unfortunately, have to wait if they're not in the situation where they can go private, which again is a bit quicker, but not everyone's in that situation. Gender bias in itself, as we said, a lot of women internalise those symptoms. So again, it's harder to pick up. It might be that misdiagnosis around anxiety and depression. That's quite common. Racial and cultural bias. Again, it might be a massive barrier to getting that diagnosis. Masking and coping strategies. Some people cope so well that it's really hard to actually acknowledge that they've got the condition. Some people have had to cope very well and they've learnt. And again, then it might be actual late diagnosis itself. So it's really important to recognise that even the diagnosis itself, once you've got that, it can be really hard and a very long process to get through to that diagnosis. What's the impact of a diagnosis? So again, for every single person, it's so different. But when you finally got that diagnosis, especially when it's a late diagnosis in your later adult years, there's so much to process. Relief. Thank God you've got the answers. I'm not broken. My brain just works differently. It might be grief. It might be mourning those missed opportunities. Again, if I'd known this earlier, could I have stayed in that job? In childhood, would I have been able to get the grades that I really wanted? Looking back at years of struggling, so it can be you're almost grieving what you could have had. Anger. You can be really angry about, why was this not picked up when I was younger? Why have I had to fight for this diagnosis? A lot of the time, we're still having to fight for this. Why wasn't I supported more? myself, I was misdiagnosed 8 years ago. I could feel really angry about that, about the fact that, if I'd known that, I could have done different things. I could have, it's a lot to process all at once. And then there's suddenly this identity shift. Suddenly, you've got this diagnosis, and it's like you're almost seeing your life in a different lens. And through that, some people will start to understand kind of why they do certain things, or be able to have those conversations. Again, it depends on the individual and the level of confidence and support they've had and knowledge they have of the condition. But it's almost like you start seeing your life through a different lens completely. So how might it show up at work? So it could be an ADHD employee might be missing deadlines. It might be that time blindness. They might be late to meetings because they're struggling with recognizing where they're meant to be all at once. It might be that forgetfulness and those working memory issues. It might be that they've forgotten a deadline. It might be they've forgotten where they're meant to be, or that person they're meant to ring. It could be complete overwhelm. Again, when you're in an environment where there's lots to do all at once, that project management, I always use the hospitality environment as well. There's so much going on at once. It can be really overwhelming, and you can either shut down or completely become overwhelmed. Um, that emotional sensitivity and burnout, again, we keep going until we physically have to stop sometimes, and it's hard to recognize in ourselves actually when we are masking, so we can become more exhausted. But managing emotions, especially, at work, we can be in a high pressure environment where there's a lot. Sometimes we might be getting feedback. Things might go wrong, and that's okay. Things go wrong in life, but for someone with ADHD, that can be like the worst thing to ever happen, and it can be a lot to process it. And no one likes to cry in front of people at work, but sometimes it can be really hard for us to control that. And in the moment, we can just explode, and feel a lot of shame. Um, Again, these behaviours are often seen and mislabeled as laziness, disorganised, a lack of professionalism, but it's just that their brain works differently. It's not a character flaw. It's not something wrong with them. It just works differently, and there are things that we can do to support them, to follow deadlines, to follow their time. But it's recognising that yes, these things might be seen as that lack of performance, that lack of professionalism, but actually there's a reason for it, and there's just support needed to help someone thrive. So, some practical tools for everyday support, and again, this might be for ADHD employees to use, there might be employers to recommend. It might be visual planners. We love a visual at Pettypool. Supporting us to recognise when there are deadlines, what's in your calendar, those reminders popping up every now and then to let you know, to remind you of what's happening that week, that day. Task management apps, the Microsoft To Do, it literally saves my life every day, especially when you've got a big project that you need to break down. You can put it into manageable steps. You can set reminders if you need to contact someone about something. There's a lot of equipment now, online, offline, that can help you manage tasks. Again, it might be your personal life rather than your professional life, but there's loads on mobile phones and lots of different apps to explore, and I'll go through some at the end that I would recommend. Noise cancelling headphones or quiet spaces. Headphones can just make such a massive difference. There's now those loop ones that can block out certain noise. I've not tried them myself, but they seem to be a really good thing that people could use. But just putting headphones on sometimes can communicate without having to, that you just need a bit of quiet and you just need a bit of focus time. Quiet spaces. We'd all love work environments that have loads of rooms and loads of offices. So I understand sometimes, depending on where you are, there's not lots of space. So it might be allocated quiet time within your diary rather than quiet spaces. There's ways you can kind of look about it if you've not got the space. But if you having that quiet space that people can just go to if they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or if they really need somewhere to focus, that's really helpful. Clear written instructions and checklists. just remind our memory again can really, we can do an activity 100 times and suddenly we've forgotten our own names. So just those clear written instructions wherever is possible within your organisation is really helpful. Checklist, if there's a report coming up and you're expecting someone to report about something about their area of their organisation, put out there what you're expecting, what to put in that report, a checklist. It really helps aid someone understand those expectations. Flexible deadlines as well. People can be very different. I love a deadline because I know what I'm working to, but sometimes being flexible within that, it really helps us understand when something is due, because then we can really know and focus on something to get it done. But that flexibility around it, if someone who is neurodivergent needs more processing time, they might need more time to get something done than a person who is typical, which we call neurotypical people. So it's just recognising that they might need more time. Task chunking, going to someone and say, here's a project I need you to work on for 3 months. They might need that breaking down, and they might need a little bit of collaboration on that, of like, okay, what shall I focus on this week, that next week, etc. Even a small task. So I always use the simple task of making a cup of tea. For someone who has complex needs, they need that breaking down step by step. So it's applying that to each task that you do or that you give your employees or your colleagues. Breaking that down into small chunks can make a massive difference. And it's not something that you have to do beforehand. You can do it with the employee, with your colleague, to really help them understand what is expected of them. But these tools will often benefit everyone. It doesn't have to be someone who's neurodivergent or ADHD colleagues or employees. It can be something that is really helpful for everyone to thrive in their job. And it's that universal design. If you're designing and creating a neuro-inclusive environment where everyone thrives, it doesn't have to just focus on neurodivergent people. It's a really good practice to have. So, reasonable adjustments. You may have come across this term before, you may not have, but in the Equality Act 2010, if someone has a disability where so neurodivergent conditions fall under this, it is an employer's legal duty to make reasonable adjustments for their employees. So that can look different for any environment, that can look different for every single employee. It's not always the same, even if they've got the same diagnosis, it's not always the same, but it is a legal responsibility. So that might be flexible working hours, that might be those quiet or low stimulation workspaces that someone needs to get the job done. Reduced admin load or delegation. So again, looking at their job role, does it need carving? Do we need to look at, okay, what are you focusing on this week? Can we take some of that pressure away if you're struggling? The biggest thing that I always push is regular check-ins. Myself, when I asked for my reasonable adjustments, it was a one-to-one, just a regular one-to-one with my boss every 2 weeks, so that I can just check in, let them know how I'm feeling. It's just really helpful, but it's also gives an opportunity to review regular adjustments, because that might change. You might need more support, they might need less support. It's not just something you do set in stone. Reasonable adjustments need to be a continuous support system, but regular check-ins are 100% up there, really important for people who are neurodivergent. Buddy or mentorship systems. Not everyone always feels comfortable going to the line manager first, especially if you're starting a new job. Having that mentor, that person that you know that you can go to just talk things through is really beneficial for any environment. It might be, again, someone who is neurodivergent that's comfortable talking about it. Again, it depends on every single environment. But just that other person that you can check in with is really crucial. As I said, especially when you're new to a job, and it might be shadowing that person, it might be getting to know the basics and just having honest discussions about what they're struggling with. That person, that buddy, can then help the neurodivergent employee feedback to the line manager, and just give them that support. So it's another support system that's really helpful, but often does come up on reasonable adjustments. It's really clear to recognise that adjustments are not special treatment. It's not favouritism, because still now to this day, neurodivergent people often don't disclose their condition because there's this fear that they're going to be seen as favoritised. It's about equity. It's not about equality. It's about that's what they need. They are currently disadvantaged because of their condition, and that's what they need to be on the same level as other employees. So it's really important to recognise that. Okay. So what does neuro-inclusion leadership look like? It's clear, consistent communication. We can often struggle with communication, expectations if they change. Be clear, be direct. What are the expectations? What do you need from me? Use clear, direct language and repeat key points in writing. If you're giving feedback, if you're having a regular one-to-one, if you've had a meeting where there's action points, send out slides, send out meeting notes afterwards with action points really clear so that that person has got something that they can refer back to. Beforehand, send an agenda so that person knows what is being expected of them in that meeting. So where possible, written. It just really helps kind of give a picture of what that expectation is of that meeting, of that role. Break down those complex tasks into small manageable steps. Again, working with the employee, if you've got a project, here it is, they might just need help breaking that down or help just managing their time. Avoid last minute changes where possible, or provide support when they occur. This can be for anyone who's neurodivergent. We can struggle with sudden changes. It doesn't mean that they can't happen. That's not real life. Things happen, but it's understanding that we might need support if they do. We might need some processing time. We might just need a quiet room to process the change. Just recognising that can be a challenge for us. Permission to work differently. Not all jobs are done the same. It's recognise that productivity doesn't look the same for everyone. Allow that flexibility in how, when, and where work is done. Again, that depends on your environment and where that flexibility can be. But understand that it's not all done. Not every job is done the same. Not every person will do the job the same. And encourage people to explore and use tools that work for them. Having these conversations around what works best for you is like the first step of really acknowledging that it doesn't have to be just neurodivergent people. Everyone has their own preferences, but having those conversations regularly can make a big difference. Psychological safety. Again, I could do a whole session on this, but just to kind of delve into it a little bit, is creating that culture where people can feel safe to speak up. It's the norm. They feel like they can have that conversation. Again, it might be in a private environment, it might be in a group meeting where they feel comfortable, but asking for that help, that they can speak up, that they're struggling, that they can disclose without fear, judgment, or being a punishment. Encourage that openness, model vulnerability and curiosity yourself. I always say be curious, not critical. That curiosity is fantastic in leadership. It helps you, and being a vulnerable leader as well sets a really good role model example for people that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to admit when you need help. Avoid punitive responses to mistakes. If someone's made a mistake, don't look at the mistake, look at why that mistake might have happened. Work with the employee to understand why it happened. Again, it don't have to be just neurodivergent. Everyone makes mistakes, but focus on that learning. How can we learn from this? What support do you need from this? As I said, I could talk for a long time about it. Inclusion means making space for different ways of thinking, working, and thriving. It looks different for everyone. So just recapping on a couple of things around that, managing that performance with empathy, talking about that culture. Focus on outcomes, not process. What is the outcome we want from this person? Okay, actually, can we change the processes to get that outcome? avoid micromanagement. Just because someone's neurodivergent doesn't mean that they need you to hold their hand all the time or that you need to be constantly on them. Just be available. Just, that they can come to, again, those one-to-ones check-ins. It doesn't mean that they need constant supervision, that they need constant support. It means that they just might need a little bit more support than others. But please avoid micromanaging them, because again, that can make them feel worse about actually disclosing their condition. Use coaching style conversations. Again, if someone's come forward to you and said, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. Okay, let's make some action points together. Let's look at this together. Be their coach. Have in those regular one-to-ones, look at kind of what they're doing really well, what they find challenging, work with them to identify what they can do to get over those barriers, praise them. That coaching style, it makes them feel like you've got their back as well. Like, my boss uses this with me, and it makes me feel like, no matter what I'll go to her with, I know she'll be able to kind of coach me back, like, okay, let's see this from a point of view. That's a barrier, but what can we do together to get over that barrier? Supporting disclosure and self-advocacy. Again, another point that I could probably talk a long time about. But when someone discloses ADHD, thank them for sharing. It's a massive, massive step. Again, we've talked about, there's a lot of stigma still associated with ADHD. There's a lot of fear, a lot of shame. So thank them for sharing that information. That's probably took them a lot to get to that point. Ask them what support they need. Don't assume. Again, if they say ADHD, don't just go, well, I know ADHD, so you probably need this and you need that. Every individual is different. Work with them. They might not know what support they need, so work with them to, there'll be set reasonable adjustments that can discuss. It's a team approach. But offer them the chance to talk about. They might already have some ideas, they might not, but offer them the chance to talk about what they might need. Keep the conversation respectful and confidential. So again, working with that employee, there'll be certain people that do need to be involved and they do need to know, but it doesn't mean everyone needs to know. It's about that confidential disclosure. We'd always encourage everyone to feel that they can be open about their condition, but not everyone is, and that's their choice. But be respectful in that there's certain people that you can't, that employee will need to know, they'll have to know to support, but not everyone needs to know, and just be discreet. Avoid framing it as a problem to fix. Okay, let me fix this for you. Let me sort it out. It's not about that. It's actually what do they need to thrive. They're not a problem. They are someone that just needs support to thrive. We've talked about that culture. Again, easier said than done, not something that happens overnight. But encourage a culture of self-advocacy. So make it clear that adjustments are available to anyone who needs them. It's not just neurodivergent people or people with disabilities. That approach of that, if you work a certain way and you need help to thrive, that culture, that's okay to have that conversation. Normalise those conversations about neurodiversity and mental health. A lot of the training that I've done recently has started that conversation, which is brilliant, because then people feel that they can be more open about it and have those conversations. As we've said, kind of having that conversation of how do you work best, or do you prefer having an email after we've had a meeting? Just asking, but creating that environment where it's okay to ask. Provide training for managers on how to respond to disclosures. So we run a training session which I'll go through, but around that, how to respond, how to recognise that someone is struggling or that someone has a neurodivergent condition, how to respond the appropriate way, and what support you can refer them to. So there's a process and a clear process of how to do that. So if managers have that information, they feel more confident on approaching it the right way, because I know a lot of people want to help, but they just don't know how. So I know I've said a lot today, because there's always a lot to talk about and ADHD, and I'm probably kind of talked a lot, and there's probably a lot of things to process ourselves, but I wanted to kind of get an idea of what people might take away from today. I didn't say at the start, but I will leave some time for questions at the end. If you want to talk about anything in particular, please do ask. But it'd be great if anyone feels comfortable sharing what's one thing you could change in your workplace tomorrow to better support ADHD colleagues or employees. Again, feel free to share if you want to talk, if you want to, you'd rather use the chat. I'll just give a couple of minutes to see if anyone wants to share anything and give you that opportunity. I'll also take a sip of my drink. Darren, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, okay. I do a lot of work in ADHD, neurodiversity generally, where I work. And the one thing I constantly come up against is the company wants to look at it, wants to do things around it, where have you. Individuals, I talk directly to them. It's the line manager. Most of the time, it's their understanding. You get a good one, maybe they know nothing about neurodiversity. The doors open though, and they have the conversation, and they come and talk, and they learn. And then I've literally had conversations about, they've told me I need to take a break every 45 minutes. So, well, that might be good advice. It's not, you have to do this. Exactly what you just said on a couple of slides ago. So one thing I'd change, or one thing I'd continue to change, is that understanding of that, getting a little bit of appreciation of what it is, not being an expert in it, but just opening up the conversation to say, right, I'm going to have a conversation and listen, not tell.
100%, 100%, and that's it, Darren. It's no one expects anyone to be an expert. I'm not an expert. So it's that understanding, it's that giving them chance to kind of talk about from their point of view. But yeah, I think that lack of understanding I often find can be a barrier for neurodivergent employees, depending on where they are. Yeah, thank you, Darren, for sharing. Is there anyone else that wishes to share at this point? Nope. No problem at all. I'm sure there'll be probably a bit of processing from everything that I've gone through, and I will send the slides out afterwards because there might be things that you want to go back on and have a look at. So, but please do. Just want to go through, obviously talked about that I'm now a professional trainer. We talked about kind of that inclusion start to understanding. So we offer training to external organisations. So we have a number of workshops that we do that can be done together, that can be done separately. We run a workshop that's for colleagues and overall creating that neuro-inclusive workplace. That's for everyone. It doesn't just sit with HR. It needs to be a continuous support on how to recognise when your colleague is struggling and how to help. That neurodiversity awareness, we go into all the different conditions. We have a look how every single condition is different, what the common traits might be, what the common challenges and strengths that person might have. Understanding the clients as well. A lot of us work in a field where we have customers, clients who may be neurodivergent, and so it's really important to actually part of that inclusivity is understanding how to work best with our neurodivergent clients. Recruiting, again, recruitment is a massive barrier for neurodivergent people. That might be the process, that might be the interview stage, that might be the onboarding process. So we really delve into kind of how we can make recruitment itself, how can we rethink it so it's more neuro-inclusive, and then leading a neurodivergent workforce. So we've talked about kind of that awareness even from a leadership level of how can they get everyone on board, how can they support employees, but also that legality around it of what reasonable adjustments are, what their responsibilities are as an employer and a leader. So if you do want any further information on this, everyone should have my email, so please do let me know. Just some signposting. Again, I'll send these slides out, so don't worry about jotting anything down. But just some support systems for employees, for colleagues that want to support their colleagues. Access to work, so that's a government-funded scheme. Office funding for workplace support. That can be ADHD coaching, that can be assistive technology, travel costs, support workers, whatever is right for that individual, so they'll come and do an assessment. I will say it is not a quick process. So again, it's recognising that in between that time, your employee will still need that support. Your colleague might still need that support. At the moment, it's a 30-week wait. So it's just recognising that that's at the moment a great support, but it is currently a lot of waiting time. Employees then apply directly to that, and employers are then encouraged to work with the employee and cooperate on that. We've got specific charities, ADHD UK. There's also the that's around autism, but there's dyslexia charity. There's autism practical support, like I talked about, National Autistic Society. They offer quite a lot of resources, webinars, helplines, that advocacy. And occupational health, like you'll have your internal HR processes on how to do that, but they can assess needs and recommend those adjustments as well in the meantime. It's really important to share information about support and not always wait until an employee asks. That continuous approach of sending out regularly really helps people. Okay. Further resources, so books. Again, there's lots of books out there. I love how many books are out there, but I really struggle to read and keep that focus. So I kind of dip in and out. But there's some really good books around understanding ADHD and having like a personal perspective on it. Podcasts. There's some brilliant adult podcasts. There's Alex Partridge as well, is a brilliant podcaster. He kind of speaks to specialists every week. He was one of the videos that I watched and helped me recognise that I have ADHD. So I can really kind of recommend his podcast. There's YouTube channels, there's websites, so there's loads out there. There's to provide support within your own community as well. You can research. There's fantastic neurodiversity coaches, ADHD coaches. There's one on this call. So there's loads of support systems out there, and I will make sure I send kind of some really local recommended ADHD coaches as well with the slides, so you've got an idea of what support's out there. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, again, you might not want to ask in this group setting, but please, if not, I will send the slide out afterwards. Come back to me if you've got any questions, or you'd rather ask in a private setting, not a problem. This has obviously been recorded, so I'll send that out as well. I'm just going to read the chat because I've seen a couple of things pop up as well. DWP part fund the accommodations if you go through them for access to work. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Darren. Brilliant to know. ADHD Love is a great channel hosted by a married couple giving a humorous take on everyday challenges. I've not seen this podcast, Rebecca, so thank you for that, but I have heard about it, and I've heard that's quite a good podcast video, YouTube video to watch as well. Yeah, Laura's the same. Alex's podcast, ADHD chat. Yeah, I always forget the name. Brilliant podcast as well. Are there any questions at this stage, or any comments that anyone wants to share? Yeah, Lindsay?
Hi, Emma. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Well. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. That was such a fantastic webinar. And again, just your energy and enthusiasm is such a great testament to the strengths of ADHD. And, you know, it's such an important thing for us to remember what incredible individuals we've got in our organisation. And that when we really support them, then it's, you know, it helps both that individual and our organisations to thrive. So thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant. One tiny thing I wanted to share on the access to work thing, because lots of organisations don't know this, but to apply for the access to work funding, you don't need to have an official diagnosis. So quite often people think, I can't get that support because I haven't had my diagnosis yet and I'm waiting, and it's 2 years for the waiting list. But you can get, you don't need to have an official diagnosis, and you can still get that access to work support. So just wanted to add that, but thanks again, absolutely brilliant.
No worries. Thank you, Lindsay. That is a really good point. Thank you. Yeah, as Lindsay said, so you don't have to have a diagnosis. Sometimes you're often waiting for that diagnosis, and it can be a long time. So really, really important to note. Thank you, Lindsay. Just checking. Okay, got an app as well called Dubby, which is for task doubling. Yeah, task doubling as well. I've learned that through Lindsay as well from the ADHD Big Sister. It's something that I find really helpful as well. Task doubling is basically focusing on a set task all together. You'll have your separate tasks and you kind of set a timer and you can all focus on one thing, but you're kind of there to motivate each other in a way, because sometimes that motivation can be quite hard. So yeah, task doubling is definitely something I'd recommend. No worries at all. Really glad that everyone got so much from the webinar. If there's no questions, we'll finish there. But again, if you want to ask me in a private setting, you've got my details. I'll send out the slides and the further resources this afternoon. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for joining. And yeah, as I said, if you've got any questions, please just get in touch.